Hey everyone, welcome today to How to Read Some Books podcast. I am Shane Skelton along with Josh Fillmore.
Hello, hello.
And today we're talking about books.
Lots of books. This is actually episode 2. If you didn't catch the first one, go back, listen to the first episode, and it explains what we are trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, and you know what? Today I'm really excited to talk about this book. I'm serious. If my library was on fire and I could rescue one book out of it, it would be this book.
Yeah?
I'm telling you, it is the best book I think that you could read, and I think everybody ought to have it in their library.
Okay, so that's definitely one I got to go buy then?
You need to go buy it. You need to go buy it.
Okay.
All right, you ready for the title?
Yep.
It is, drum roll. All right, the title is How to Read a Book.
How fitting.
How to Read a Book.
Definitely something that I'm going to need. So
it is by Mortimer J. Adler. How to Read a Book. There it is.
Awesome.
Now, I wish that I had read this book probably 20 years ago. But unfortunately, I didn't. So I spent a lot of years wasting time, to be honest with you, in the reading. But when I ran across this book, actually by accident, and bought it and read it, I'm telling you, it changed the way that I read a book, understand a book, and it literally changed my life in my reading, and it's just an incredible book. But now, just to give you a little bit of background about the book, it was written initially, I think, in 1940. The copy that I have here in front of me, this one was kind of a reprised edition. Charles Van Doren helped with that, but it was published around 1940. And Dr. Mortimer, he was born in 1902 and died in 2001. Now, let me give you just a little bit of the background of this man. He was a very accomplished man, but he was chairman and co-founder with Max Weissman of the Center for the Study of Great Ideas, and the editor-in-chief of its journal, Philosophy is Everybody's Business. He is the founder, or was the founder and director of the Institute for Philosophical Research, chairman of the board of editors of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah, I remember.
One of those.
Yeah, one. I didn't have a full set.
You had to piece ours
That's
together.
right. I think I had like D, where there's nothing really interested in there, you know?
Yeah, D. No, he had a set, but he was the chairman of the board of editors. So, I mean, that tells you something about
absolutely.
that. He was editor-in-chief of the Great Books of the Western World. He was the editor of Great Ideas of Today, published by the Encyclopedia Britannica. Co-founder and honorary trustee of the Aspen Institute. He was an instructor at Columbia University, professor emeritus at the University of Chicago from 1930 to 1952, and Dr. Adler was a highly productive author, educator, philosopher, and lecturer. He wrote about 50 books and 200 different articles, and I have a couple of his books that he's written, and he's got one on how to have a conversation, which maybe we'll review.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this one, I think, is probably the best one for me. It's about 420 some odd pages long. So when I first found it, I thought, why do I need a book on how to read a book?
That was my first thought. Like, that's kind of counterproductive, right? Or counterintuitive.
Yeah, like, podcast of books.
Yeah. That's very true.
But I'm telling you, this book is by far one of the best books you will ever read apart from the Bible. I'm serious about that. So let's talk about why this book was so important.
Okay. Yeah, that's my next question. Like, what put this above the Bible?
Well, it's not above the Bible.
Let me backtrack. You did say that it was second to the Bible, but
I think it is.
So my question is then, which I'm probably going to get into, would this book help people learn how to read the Bible better?
It will. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. If you learn how to read this book and understand what he's talking about, and you do the things that he suggests in this book, it changed my preaching. It changed the way I study. It changed all that. And even though I had, in college courses, on hermeneutics and how to study the Bible and all these different things, I'm telling you, none of them helped me as much as this book helped me.
Hermeneutics.
We'll get into that later.
Okay.
All right.
That just sounds
it's not
funny.
important.
Say, can you
Yeah.
hermeneutic? I just want to say, Anyway, sorry. Back on track.
Okay, I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyway, I think if I would have had this book in college, it would have helped me a whole lot. But people ask me often, they say, after I get done preaching, how in the world did you get all of that out of that one verse? I've read it 100 times, never seen it that way, or that one paragraph or whatever. But the truth is I have put to practice these things in my life, not only in reading a book, but reading the Bible. And it has definitely changed my life in that. But I have to preference that to say this. What he talks about in this book here is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So you got to be disciplined enough to sit down and do it. You got to see the importance of it. But if you do, I'm telling you, it's fantastic. And one of the reasons why I think that this book and what it has taught me is there's a difference today in the educational system than it was 150 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. Today's education system is one that teaches you, what to think. It teaches you what to know, what to think, but it doesn't teach you how to think. And that's the key difference. It teaches you what to think, but not how to think. We've lost, and I think in our society, the ability to think for ourselves.
I agree with that.
I mean, really.
Look at the news. The news tells you, world views on how people just don't think for themselves.
Well, exactly. I mean, they package it to look like, you are making the decision. Mm-hmm. We report, you decide. But that's not really the case, because they are really reporting what they want you to know, and they're reporting it in such a way that will cause you to think a certain direction. So it's all bias, mm-hmm. In that. Sitcoms, entertainment, all these outlets, they all have an agenda that they want to advance, and they want to shape the way that we think about it. Mm-hmm. Advertising, marketing, they're constantly telling you what to like and what you don't like, And so it's dumbed us down to a degree so that we don't think for ourselves. We take what they say, and that's good enough. Even when we come to reading a book, we'll take what the author says, and that's enough. But I'm convinced that reading the right books the right way can cause you to think for yourself. And this book that Mortimer wrote teaches you how to do that. And that's why I think it's so important when we read a book to go by the principles that he has written here. All right, so let's just review a sample of what the author has taught me, and maybe it will encourage others to read, and maybe it'll whet your appetite.
Could be. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm really excited about this, because that's one of the things that I think that I struggle with the most, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the people out there listening and to this podcast is probably saying, I read, and 9 times out of 10 I'll read something, and I have to reread it again because I was so distracted I couldn't remember what I read,
sure.
Or it just didn't make enough sense to follow in line with what I thought the book was going in the direction. So, I feel like I get lost in a book for the wrong reasons, not the right reasons,
Right.
And I get discouraged and frustrated, and then that turns me away from wanting to read. I'd rather watch the movie instead, because at least then I can pay attention, So, and you don't get the popcorn grease all over the pages when you're trying to eat.
Charlton Heston, him and Moses. Yeah, I think one thing that we desperately need in this entertainment society, and it goes back to your point there, is the ability to train our intellect in analysis and reflection. We have to learn to meditate. Mm-hmm. And I think in order to do that, as Mortimer talks about in the book here, we have to become what he calls an active reader.
Now back up just a minute, because you said meditate. Now,
I'm not talking about yoga.
Well, that's where I'm getting at, is because maybe some of the, listeners may not be Christians yet. And so they don't, when they immediately hear the word meditate, they think of getting to that Zen and, chanting and, all that kind of stuff. So that's not what you're talking about when you mean meditate, correct?
No, I'm talking about reflection. It's like a cow that eats grass. He chews the cud over, and he just keeps rechewing it,
right.
rechewing it. And that's what I mean by that. You just take a subject, you reflect, you digest it, you keep reflecting, you keep digesting. It's just you're turning it over and over.
So some kind of a thought that you put that you just keep working that thought through your head until you finally kind of come to a conclusion.
You're working it out.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You're dissecting it in your mind and you're working it out. That's right. So you want to become an active reader, not a passive reader. I guarantee you 90 to 95%, the majority of readers out there are passive readers. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you pick up a book and you start in the beginning, you read to the end, and it's basically information only. You're just reading it for information.
Right.
But really, in order to become an active reader, you've got to get beyond the information stage and get to the discovery stage and the understanding stage. See, information only does not change a man. It don't change a man. Discovery and understanding changes a man. It's the aha moments that you have. It's not, just the newspaper doesn't change anybody.
Right.
You can read it and it's just information. But if you really want to grow, then when you start reading the book, you have to learn to become an active reader. Now, there are different ways of reading a book, and Mortimer talks about this. There are different subjects that you read at different levels. So you don't read every book the exact same way. There are certain, you read social sciences a certain way, you read poetry a certain way, you read history a certain way, you read theology a certain way. So there's different ways to read a book, but all of these ways require you to be an active reader rather than a passive reader. And there's a big difference in that. Now, let's think of it like this. Think of reading a book like playing baseball. You like to play baseball,
yep.
don't you?
Played baseball through college, whole 9 yards.
You went to college?
Well, we talked about this earlier today. I did attempt college. I
thought you liked to surf.
I do. I went to the University of North Florida, which was way too close to the beach. Mm-hmm. And at that point in my life, I was surfing quite a bit. And so the surf report dictated whether or not I went to class. And here's the deal. If I had a book that would have taught me how to read those textbooks, maybe I might have put a little bit more
Would you have read it?
Probably not. Unless it was a waterproof copy that I may have.
If we'd have put a cover on there that says how to surf, would you have read it?
Probably. Okay. And then I got about halfway through and be like, this is nothing about surfing. But I did figure out how to read a book.
All right. Well, think of a book like playing baseball. You like to play baseball.
I played baseball, yeah.
Think of the ball as the information. The ball is the information. The pitcher is the author. And the catcher is the reader. Now, catching the ball, to me, is just as important and it takes just as much activity as pitching or hitting. Mm-hmm. It's very important. In a little league, I played catcher and on up through community leagues. I played catcher in different positions. So I understand the value of a good catcher. The art of catching is the skill to be able to catch every kind of pitch, whether it be a fastball, a curveball, or a changeup, anything that the pitcher throws at him, okay? So similarly, when the art of reading is like that, it's the skill of catching every sort of communication that the author wants to throw at you. Mm-hmm. So it's being able to catch poetry, catch history, catch whatever it may be. You have to be able to catch it in order for it to change your life. So both the pitcher, which is the author, and the catcher, the reader, have an important role to play. They both have to be on the same page, if you will.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So if you don't catch what the writer's saying, it don't do you any good.
Right.
The information's there, but if you don't catch it, if you don't understand what to do with it, it does you absolutely no good. And by being a passive reader, to me, you're just letting the author do all the work. You're letting the author do all the work. That's being a passive reader. You're just reading it. You just flip it open. You're reading a chapter. You close it, and you put it back on the shelf. That's the author doing all the work, really. Mm-hmm. You're not putting anything in it outside of just your time and just reading it. There's no real change in your lives. There's no real aha moment. So here's what I think. I think the writer, he provides you with the information that you need. Okay, he's the pitcher. He provides you with the information that you need, and the catcher, he takes it, he receives it, but he analyzes it, and he meditates on it, and then what he does as the reader is he lifts the subject, whatever the subject is, he lifts that subject matter to a higher level. And then that becomes discovery, and that becomes understanding. Until you have taken what has been written and lift it to a different level, lift it to a higher level, then it's just information. You're just a passive.
So to go back to the baseball analogy, pitcher throws the ball to the catcher. The author's throwing the information to the reader.
Yeah.
The reader sees the play at second.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's stealing from first to second. Jumps up, meaning that he takes that information and does something with it, meaning make the play at second.
Not really, but that's not bad.
But I mean, if you look at it from
what I mean is you got to be able to catch whatever he throws at you.
Right, correct.
Right.
Because
and I guess you could say,
he's going to, once you receive that information,
then you do something with
it. Then the play, the act in play, or
I got you.
And then you're going to actually do something with that information because now you're seeing things from a different point of view, meaning the pitcher doesn't see the guy running from first to second to make the steal. The catcher does. So he has now taken that information that the pitcher has now given to him and then making the play or applying it to your life.
Sure. I got you.
To change some kind of a situation.
Sure. Anything to take the information to a higher level.
Gotcha.
I believe this. I believe a good author will always provoke the reader to think and reflect.
Right.
I mean, that's why write a book if you don't believe that. If I have something to share to you, and I take the time to put it down on paper, I want you to take what I have written and what I've shared, and I want you to run with it, to take it beyond what I can do. As Warren Wiersbe, the great author, is now passed, he said that he stands on the shoulders of great giants of yesteryear, and what he means by that is the men that he's standing on the shoulder of the men that come along before him, and he's taking it to a higher level. And I think that the information that we receive when we read a book or read the Bible or read a verse, take it and then take it to a different level. Take it to a level of understanding, a level of discovery, that aha moment. Now, to be an active reader, it requires a starting point, right?
That is correct.
So if you want to go further than what I'm going to say today, then obviously read the book.
Read the book.
Read the book.
Go read the book.
Go read the book. Mortimer J. Adler, How to Read a Book. But he does give you some starting points, and I'll kind of elaborate on some of this, and this is what I do when I start to read a book. Now, I'm not talking about a book that's fiction. I'm not going to talk about a book that's has to do with, poetry or anything like that. I'm speaking to those that are wanting to maybe learn the Bible or theology or maybe a self-help book of some sort or a personal growth book, something like that.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you ever read fiction?
Very seldom. I'd watch the movie. I ain't got time to read fiction.
I
say that tongue-in-cheek, but in reality, I do read some fiction because I love the imagination of it. So it gets my imagination going sometimes. But that's only when I need to jumpstart something.
Right. And see, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've ever read anything fiction, and I don't see the point in reading fiction.
I've read things like Moby Dick and stuff like that. I love it.
Okay.
I just absolutely love it. But, it's not necessarily something that I do all the time, I'll be honest with you.
I know people that's all they read is fiction books. And I'm like, why waste your time with something that's not going to help you further. Again, now that may be my lack of understanding about fiction books too. So,
fiction books really excite the imagination.
Okay,
I mean it really does. If you understand the author and to read between the lines of a fictional book and let it stimulate your imagination and stimulate your storytelling and things of that nature, I think they're good for that.
Gotcha.
So I don't think they're bad. Now, romance novels, chunk it out the window. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't need to be reading that kind of trash. All right, don't fill your mind full of that mess.
All right.
If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. All right.
Right. Exactly.
We're not going to. We're not talking about that kind of garbage.
Okay.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a starting point for your reading, and if you want to go further, get the book and read it, because I'm telling you, he deals with just about every type of reading and how to do it in greater detail in this book. But here's what you need to do. First of all,
and also too, before we get into that, if you guys are interested in getting this book, we are going to leave the link down in the comments below. It is an Amazon affiliate. That's probably the easiest way to get it.
All right, now number one, talk to the book. That's the first thing. Talk to the book.
Now, you're going to have to really explain this one, because that does not make any sense to me at all.
You know, Mortimer was not the first one to explain that to me. I mentioned Wiersbe a while ago, Warren Wiersbe. He said that he talks to his Bible when he studies the Bible, and I heard him say that years ago. And I thought, well, that's interesting, you know. And the Bible is what God talking to us.
True.
You know, and so when you talk back to the Bible, it's, you know, your way of communicating back to God.
Now, audibly,
and things
you talk
of that nature.
audibly?
Absolutely. Talk to the book. All right? Ask questions about it. That's what I do.
Okay. So you literally stand there reading the book and say, okay, book, what are you trying to tell me?
Absolutely, I do.
Oh, wow.
I do.
Now,
I talk to the book.
That's borderline crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could do it in your mind if you want to, whatever you want to do. But when I say talk to the book, here's what I'm meaning by that. Have the habit of asking questions as you read.
Got it.
Because if you ask questions while you read, you will become a better reader. Okay, so learn to ask, what's this book about? What is the writer trying to tell me? Learn to look between the lines. Now, use your imagination. Immerse yourself into the story. Let's just say I'm reading about a story of David and Goliath, okay, in the Bible. So what I try to do is I immerse myself into that story in my imagination. So I try to put my senses into that. So I try to smell what David smelled, and I try to see what David saw and feel what he felt. I try to feel the wind in my face and the anxiety that, you know, must have filled his heart. I try to imagine myself feeling all of those things. So I immerse myself into the story, and I try to ask questions. If David done this, you know, would I do this? Or could I have done this? Or should he have done that? So you have to almost put yourself in that story. And when I'm reading a book, I do similarly the same thing. I try to, what is the author trying to tell me? As he sat down with his pen and paper or at his typewriter or whatever, what is it that he is trying to communicate? If I was writing this book, how would I try to communicate that? And so I use my imagination, I read between the lines, and I do that with a pencil in my hand. Pencil, pen, notebook, whatever you want to do. I just believe this. I believe when you buy a book, it don't fully become yours until you mark it up.
Okay.
Honestly.
So much for resale.
Yeah. Resale. What? No.
I guess you can't build a library by reselling your books either, too.
Yeah,
so
I don't plan on reselling them. I was going to pass it down to my kids, and they're not really that interested that much. But they're like, it's called an audiobook, Dad.
Yeah. Hey, easy with the audiobook.
I know, right? It's like, I'd rather see the movie.
You're right.
But, you know, I don't really believe it's mine until I have fully marked it up the best that I can. I mean, I think this. I think that by marking your book, writing questions in the margins of the book and underlining things, I think that's the highest form of compliment you can pay to an author. Because you're engaging in that conversation with him. You're talking with him.
That makes sense.
About that. So if I sat down with an author, which obviously I can't with Mortimer, so in order for me to have a conversation with him, I've got to mark it up. That's just the way it is. Now, by doing that, I'm going to become more engaged in it. I'm going to become more involved in the reading. My mind's going to be focused on it. It keeps me from wandering. You know, like you was talking about earlier. Right. You go this direction, that direction, you lose focus. You won't if you're reading it analytically and you're reading it with a pencil in your hand and you're reading it as a student and not a teacher. You know, you're asking questions.
So let's say you don't want to write in the book. If you were to just do it in a journal, do you get the same aspect with that? Or
yeah, whatever. I don't particularly do that, but a lot of people do.
Well,
my kids do. They love the journaling.
Well, my only I guess reservation to that would be because then when you go back and reread the book, now you have to have 2 books instead of the 1 book.
No, you don't. Well, pick up the conversation where you left off.
Well, that's what I'm saying though, is that if you do it in a journal, then you're going to have to carry the journal with the book when you read it because your conversation's in a different book. So I see where you're talking about where you would actually write in the book.
I write in the book. I write over the words if I have to.
You do your own edits in there?
I do. I mean, I am involved in that book completely. So I mark it up. I dog ear the pages. I mark the words that I want marked. I asterisk things, I mean, I outline them. Here's the first point. Here's the second point. Here's the third point that I want to highlight. So to me, now you can do whatever you want, but to me, that's having a conversation with the author. So that's being engaged. That's the pitcher and the catcher. You're both working together. You're in sync there.
I can see that.
That's what I do. And then second of all, don't be afraid to read a book with a dictionary. Look up some of the words that are being said. If you don't have a clear understanding of it, then look the word up. Now today, my kids have never even seen a dictionary. It's Google. Just Google it.
Here's mine.
Just Google it.
That's all right.
Put it, type it in your phone and I don't care what it is, but make sure that you understand. That's my point. You understand what the author is trying to say, and pay attention to the adjectives that are used and mark those type things. So look up the meanings, and then the third thing. Here's what I do: is as I'm asking questions, as I'm marking up my book, I am playing the devil's advocate, and I'm challenging statements, I'm challenging theories, and I'm challenging hypotheses. Why did he say that? What's the purpose of that? Or I may challenge it in such a way, tradition says this, or, society or culture is this way, or what's the difference? What's he trying to say? So what I'm doing is I'm just challenging statements. I don't just take what is being said as the full gospel. I want to make sure that we look at it from all different viewpoints and we look at it from every side. I think if you just take what the author says as the gospel and you don't challenge statements and you don't think through certain things that are being said, then you're reading it sort of with a closed mind. I think you ought to have an open mind and you ought to challenge things. Now, by doing that, 9 times out of 10, I come to the same conclusion the author did.
Probably.
So but it's still a good process to go through, to challenge what is being said. If take for instance, if I'm wanting to learn about love, okay, well, there's different things about love that different people say it means. I love pizza, or I love humanity, or I love, my dog, or I love my wife, or I love my children. Each one of those loves is on a different level. So if somebody just says to me, you ought to love so-and-so, then I look at it and go, well, what does love mean in the context of what he's saying? And is there a different way to love this? Is a different way to love that? So you have to have an understanding of love. So that takes your mind into a different direction. You can think about, what love is, and then you write it all down, and then you challenge the author with that or whatever. So, I mean, there's ways to do that, but the point I'm trying to make is you need to be engaged with the author. And then I think some of the most important things is this. After you get done reading a chapter, and then after you get done reading a book in its entirety, but after you get done, especially with a chapter, sum up in your own words what the author is trying to tell you. Sum it up. And try to make it as concise as possible. You don't want, I don't need another chapter. I don't need a book. I just need, if I had to put it on the back of a business card, what is this author trying to tell me? And what I try to do is I try to, in my mind, use my own language. And so I don't try to use the language of the author. I try to use my own language, and I try to say it to me better than what he said it.
In hillbilly. Try to re-hillbilly it.
Appalachian English. Yeah. The most hillbilliest way I can do it.
That's right.
Come and listen to my story. I try to say it my own way.
Right.
Because to be honest with you, if I can't say it my own way, then I've not really grasped what he said.
Right.
So I've not understand it completely myself. So if I know that if I can put it in my own language and sum it up in a very concise way, then I've grabbed what he said. So I try to, at the end of each chapter, this is what I think he is saying, this is what he did say, and this is how I would say it. And then I think one of the most important things, and this is where the work comes in. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is where the work really comes in, is that when you get done with the book, especially when you get done with the book, I pull out 3 columns in a notebook or in the back of the book, whatever. But I put 3 columns. I put one that says positive, and then column that says negative, and then a column that says interesting facts. Okay, my kids are learning this in school right now, and it's I get to help them with this in their homework. I think it's fascinating. But in those 3 columns, here's what I do. In the positive column, I list 10 things that are positive about that chapter that I feel, or about that book, that I feel is positive. 10 things. And what that does, that causes me to go back and think through the entirety of the book again. And then I list 10 things I think are negative about the book. I think the author could have said it better this way. I think he could have injected this. I think he could have left this whole portion out right here. I think, there are 10 negatives that I feel that the author could or could not have done. And then I try to name 10 different interesting facts about the book, such as, maybe here's the date of the book that was written, the author, and here's maybe 10 facts about or 2 or 3 facts about the author. But I try to come up with 10 things. So 10 is my magic number. You can do it with whatever. But what you need to do is you need to write these things down so that you can clearly know what the author is saying, what he's not saying, and have a clear understanding of the book. I don't think that you've really engaged with that book until you're able to write down 10 things. Okay. So it's actually 30 things if you think about it.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot.
It's a lot. And that's where the work comes
right.
in, So if you do that, I think that you are better able to understand the book. That takes you from the passive reader to the active reader. And it takes you from information only stage to understanding, discovery, and the aha moments. And you walk away changed. Mm-hmm. You walk away better. And not just, here's the book, close the book, I'm done. So that is putting your toe in the water here of what Mortimer has in this book. I'm telling you, if I would have had this book early in college, I'd have been light years ahead of where I am today. So I encourage you, if you're just starting to read, if you're a high schooler or something, get in this book, learn it. If you're an older person, you've been reading all your life, I was there, but I'm telling you, this book right here will challenge you even in that stage of your life as well.
Very cool. Well, I'm actually very intrigued. I'm, as shocking as this is, probably going to buy that book.
Yeah, you ought to buy it. It's got me words.
It's got lots of words and no pictures.
Lots of words, no pictures.
But anyway, all right. So that wraps it up for our second episode. We are excited about this podcast and ready to dive into some more books, doing some more book reviews. Yep. If you guys have any comments or suggestions for us on some books that you might think that you want us to dive into, by all means, leave them in the comments below. If you guys are listening to this on our podcast, we do have a YouTube channel where you can look at our bright, shining faces while we're talking. We both have a face for radio, so don't judge us. But
that's right.
We also have, the social media outlets as well, too. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, we're probably there. So, but that pretty much wraps it up for today. Is there anything else, Shane, you want to add before we go?
That's it. Read some books.
Go read some books. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the thumbs up if you're watching the YouTube channel. It does help, believe it or not, to have us be seen to more people. So that's it for us. go read some books. Go get this book. Like I said, link is below in the comments. And as always, God bless, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.